I remember gas being 89 cents, and I'm not that old.
Yeah. So
or a dollar,
so
maybe it was
now we're
$1.89.
I remember gas being under $1.
Okay.
You know,
So
when I moved to Salt Lake, it was 99 cents.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's just $100,000 10 years from now. We'll not spend like $100,000 today. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. What if you're planning for retirement? You're setting aside money. You've got all this stuff going for you, and then you're like, there's a gap from where I want to be versus where I am. What kind of things can I do? That's the question we're tackling on Ask the Money Nerds today. Chief of Staff Stolba, Amanda, Iowa, loves everything Iowa. Also Kansas City fan because lived in Kansas City.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I'm a Midwest gal.
Midwest, and we got you out here west. It's not like west, but we got you out west here.
Yeah, the farthest west I've lived is Hawaii.
That's like,
so I'm kind of in the middle.
It's almost in the east, so far west. You know?
It was a good season of
How
life.
long were you there?
A little over a year.
All right, I know this is a long question today, so I'm going to be taking notes as you go through, and we'll unpack a lot of this. So
Yes.
Let's hit it up.
Okay. So the question is from Linda.
Okay.
She wants to ask the age-old question of, can we retire yet?
Hey, can we retire yet?
My husband and I are both 57 and really ready to ditch our high-stress corporate jobs.
Okay, so let's start there real quick. Like 57 is really young with today's longevity, right? So if you make it to 83, 85, 87 years old, that is a long time. It's basically like being in retirement as long as you were in your working years. And when you think about it, you earn $1, almost 50 cents of the dollar goes to sales tax, excise tax, property tax, and income tax.
Gotta love those
So now we have
taxes.
that. Now we're, so there's like a lot of things that make this complicated or hard to achieve. So maybe retiring from the corporate job is the right thing to do. But what if there was retiring into something else that you'd still had control over the income, even if it wasn't the same high stress and maybe as high of income, but still was a way for you to earn while spending less time working? Yeah. Just one consideration. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, number one, here we go. The next part of the question is, we project our expenses to be about $100,000 per year for the first 10 years. It would probably be significantly less after, but to be conservative, I want to use that amount going forward.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Significantly less after. Here's my concern. Inflation. So it wasn't that long ago. I mean, during our lifetime, Stolba, where we could buy things for pretty cheap.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Homes, cars.
I remember gas being 89 cents, and I'm not that old.
Yeah. So
or a dollar,
so
maybe it was
now we're
$1.89.
I remember gas being under $1.
Okay.
When I moved to
that.
Salt Lake, it was 99 cents. So, there's just $100,000 10 years from now. We'll not spend like $100,000 today.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Like when I went to school in Southern Utah, in Cedar City, we'd go to Vegas. You could get, an all-you-can-eat buffet for under $5. You can get shrimp cocktail for 99 cents. You get drinks for less than a few dollars. And now it's like $25 for a drink there. Now to go out and eat there, it's a huge price tag. The prices have changed substantially. So we've really got to consider inflation if you want to have a consistent quality of life. And my bigger concern is, what if you're in retirement constantly worried about, am I going to outlive my money? Or we want to do this, but what's that going to mean because the market's not cooperating or interest rates weren't as high as we thought? Like, it's really going to be about what are you going to do to have a lot more control? Because if inflation's there, that's going to confiscate your wealth over time. If interest rates fluctuate, that means that you're kind of subject to whatever happens there. And if taxes fluctuate, because from 1944 to 1981, taxes were above 50% on average, where today they're at 37% at the top. So if taxes go up, that could confiscate lifestyle. If inflation continues at this pace, that becomes problematic, and interest rates being low. So those are a couple things working against you. My first suggestion is maybe retire from your corporate job and find something else to supplement the income. But something that's engaging, something that it's not going to be like bliss all the time, but that you still enjoy more than you don't.
Yeah. And I'm sure they have a lot of knowledge in their field of expertise and working in corporate America that they could share with other people, coaching or you know, doing something like that.
I think this whole notion of living off 70% of your income, which came from retirement planning, because you'll have less debt. Okay, that's fair. Maybe you'll pay off your mortgage and those kind of things, or you won't need as much to live on because maybe your kids aren't at home. Just because your kids aren't at home doesn't mean that you don't still have expenses and supporting and things. And plus, if you're not working, you now have 7 days a week to spend money, right? Or to try to entertain yourself or potentially travel, or there's actually more opportunity to spend. So we have inflation against that, and then we have a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. So I think we have to really dismantle this myth of you can live off less. Well, you can, but do you want to? Mm-hmm. That's a big question.
Yeah. Yeah, a very important question. Okay, the next part, she says Social Security would kick in at $59,000 per year at age 67, so about 10 years after they could potentially retire. Due to the projected shortages, I think it might make sense to factor about 75% of that. Where we struggle is combining all the pieces of this puzzle, figuring in Social Security, taxes, as well as our investment income. I've used a lot of online calculators, but just... she prefers the Monte Carlo simulations,
which are good because it shows a bunch of different variances with different interest rates, with different, investment interest rates that are being earned versus paying. So that's how I kind of learned early on in my econometrics. I did Monte Carlo simulations to figure out if my variable universal life would work, and I found out it wouldn't. So they are pretty useful tools.
Is that something that the general public has access to?
Yeah, I mean, in today's world. But yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So
now
here are some figures. They have $205,000 in cash.
That's really nice.
$578,000 in investment accounts.
Okay, that's great too.
$1.9 million in an IRA and 401ks.
Okay.
$94,000 in a Roth.
Okay.
Home equity is $400,000. They still carry a mortgage, but plan on downsizing in 3 to 4 years when their sons go to college.
Okay.
Speaking of college, they have a 529 plan for him, and there's $135,000 in that account.
Sounds like it'll pretty much go to him. So, okay.
And she said, I
love, first off, I just got to acknowledge, like, they've done so many great things here.
Absolutely.
And done a lot really right. Yeah.
Yeah. So she hasn't included the 529 plan in their
I left
retirement.
That out too.
Okay. So most of our money is tied up until 59 and a half and will be taxable. I'm budgeting $2,000 a month for pre-Medicare healthcare insurance, but know that this is a wild guess. Hopefully we will not fall into the sequence of the returns nightmare. Would you feel comfortable retiring now? Our other option would be to work part-time for the next 3 years in a pre-retirement phase. We would hope to be fully retired by 60 at least, or at the latest. Any thoughts or insight would be most appreciated. Lastly, our combined income per year varies as we are in sales, but it typically falls within $175,000 per year that they can make together.
So look, they've got a ton of great ingredients. One is considering income smoothing. So this is from a tax perspective.
Did you say smoothing?
Smoothing. Okay. Yeah. I know that. I don't know if we're looking at the screen, it looks terrible. ING, income smoothing, which is like there might be times to use some money from the Roth versus some money from the IRA and 401k. So one consideration is a conversion to a Roth on the IRA and 401k the first year they're in retirement, right? Because there will be no other income. And if they do something called like a rescue strategy where they might get better valuation. So where right now the taxes are historically low, actually. They really are historically low, with the top one being 37%. And the average top marginal bracket's been like around 57%.
Okay.
So now might be the time to do that. Then they have no concern about the tax fluctuations in retirement, and that can eliminate one of those things. They've got plenty of cash on hand. They've got the investable of $578,000 outside of the Roths and the IRAs, and they've got equity in the home, which would be tax free because they're married, up to $500,000 of gain. So they have some good things from a tax perspective, and especially if they're willing to work part time, whether that's in consulting or whether that's in 1099 income with sales, that gives them a lot of opportunity to create additional tax advantages that might even create some offsets with, the other investments that they have. So, that's another notion there.
Mm-hmm. So if we answer her question specifically,
I never feel comfortable retiring.
Yeah. Okay.
No, because inflation is a crushing thing. And because if we retire, there's 3 issues we have. Number 1, we're no longer in control of the outcome of our income. Mm-hmm. So it's now relying upon the investments to do the work, which you can maneuver, but at the same time, a lot harder to control. So that's the first consideration. Second is purpose. So what do you do if you're retired fully? Maybe there's grandkids, maybe there's travel that you've always delayed, but at what point do you feel really engaged in value creation in the world, and what's the plan for that? Because without purpose, people tend to die, right? So we got the money issue, we got the outcome of the income, so not having control there. We've got purpose. And then if money becomes a constraint where you start cutting back because you're worried about outliving your money, which USA Today, I remember reading that, which was the number 1 fear of retirees was the fear of running out of money. It can impact relationships.
Most
because
definitely.
Now it's like, well, I better not go out, or we better start saving. And if life becomes about preservation, that miserly mentality creates scarcity, which you end up having a retirement nightmare rather than a retirement dream. So as people watch this, I mean, there's so many things here that people would die for. We've got multi-millions.
Yeah.
But that multi-millions, we're saying, could that even create the $100,000 of income that is being looked for? Well, in today's environment, we run the risk of disinvesting if it's in a fluctuating thing like the stock market. We run the risk of, low interest rates, not providing the type of income that would be wanted. So the question is, do you have a permanent death benefit? Permanent death benefit. Here's why. If you ever pay off your mortgage, that death benefit could be used as collateral to reverse the mortgage to get tax-free access to that cash during your retirement to supplement it if there's inflation in the future. The other thing is, if you have a death benefit, instead of just living off the interest of the investments in the IRA, which in today's environment, maybe that's providing, let's say, if I were to, take an estimate of 100,000 would be pretty easy to provide from that, right? The 100,000 that they're talking about, just from that, not including the Roth, not including if they sold the home and there was equity. Great. So there's $100,000 coming in from that taxable. What if we just started increasing that it started at 100, but it eventually went to 125, eventually went to 150, and then it eventually kills these accounts by age 85, right? So those are now down to 0 because you're spending your principal. Well, the reverse mortgage could back that up. And the other thing is having this death benefit could replenish that or even be sold at that point. So this is in my book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? FreeWWRD.com, as in What Would the Rockefellers Do? FreeWWRD.com. You get the download, and then you can pay for shipping if you want a physical copy of the book. That would be something to truly consider, is how do we get these existing assets to produce 20% more or 30% more cash flow to supplement these risks that we've talked about to make a better retirement. If you don't have this death benefit, then what happens is your assets become your insurance because you don't want to spend your principal in fear of running out of money, which limits this in what could be done. But at least knowing that you could do a reverse mortgage if you downsize and pay off the home, well, that gives a backstop if there's tax issues or tax fluctuations. Knowing that you could move to a Roth as a one-time conversion, no matter how much money you've earned, that's a right that you have, especially if you could do some income smoothing at the times that you do it, that you don't hit all of that at the highest tax bracket, right? So those are just a few considerations to kind of help out. But yes, I would be concerned too. They're being very analytical. They're being very intelligent. They've got a lot of resources. But the question is, if you're just living off the interest, you're going to feel the effects of inflation, and you're going to feel the effects of really low interest rate environments, which we've been in. So, is there something out there that they could do? Buy Then Build is a book that I think is great because maybe part-time being business owners with the type of skill sets that they have, is there a business that could create a lot better cash flow and a much bigger tax advantage, but that isn't going to be a full retirement at that point.
Yeah. I think Linda and her husband have done a great job of saving and really trying to plan for their future. But I think they do bring up a good point where there is a lot of fear around retirement and like, am I going to have enough money and am I going to be able to enjoy my retirement? And so I think that's a pretty
And
common
especially if we see a
denominator.
big drop in the stock market, because I imagine a lot of it. So having bottoms when you're at this level and you're getting close to retirement where it would automatically move to cash if it dipped by more than a certain amount.
Is that what you're like trailing
a
stop
trailing
loss?
stop loss? Look at you, just dropping knowledge.
I'm a money nerd myself.
Yeah,
Garrett.
look at it's rubbing off on you maybe a little bit. So this is good, but just how do you protect the downside? And when you are taking income, how do you smooth that? Whether that's a bond ladder, whether that's a immediate type of annuity for a portion of that, moving it to a Roth environment where you have less, worries about tax fluctuations in the future, protecting the downside. What other things can you do to create a lot better cash flow? Maybe you end up being the financier for the houses for the kids or the student loans, because that gets a guaranteed interest rate a lot better than, what you're going to get at a bank. So just a couple notions there. But yeah, I see the concern, but willing to have at least a side hustle or a secondary business potentially, and having a little bit more control in those later years, I think would be really nice, even if you're spending very minimal amounts of time because you bought the right type of business with the right type of infrastructure. That's just an asset a lot of people don't consider. But if we hit a recession, those businesses go on sale. And the stock market, you might be paying 30 times, right, on the price to earnings ratio, or 60 times, where in a private business, you might be paying 2 to 3 times. So there's a lot better deals, even though it requires a little bit more personal involvement and personal, time. But if they're willing to have a side hustle for 3 years, that might be the answer.
Yeah. And looking at retirement from a different lens of, it's just a new season of like creating in a different way.
Right. Where you're not killing yourself working so many hours, but you're still involved and engaged to a certain degree.
Yes.
And if you have a more, I took 2 months off right when you started, and I went to Italy, right? That was the mini retirements and the enjoyment along the way, but came back into something that I enjoy, that I want to continue doing.
You had a lot of excitement and energy around it.
Didn't want to be, I'm being careful not to burn out and taking time off along the way. So any other pieces to this question?
No, we covered
all
it
right.
all.
That was very involved. A phenomenal question. Obviously, I would go to wealthfactory.com/private and have a much more detailed conversation with investment advisors and people that can do, the run the numbers within software and look at the current situations and, help you with obviously you're doing Monte Carlo simulations, like super impressed. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think it's you're raising the bar and the standard for other people out there of what's even possible. So great work, great job. And if you have questions out there, go to askmynerds.com, turn your thoughts into profits, build the life that you love.